Moadim lesimcha, good morning to everyone. Hope you're doing well. We're celebrating Chol Hamoed Sukkot, and this weekend, Friday, Shabbos, Sunday, the celebrations continue. Friday is known as Hoshana Rabbah, Shabbat is Shemini Atzeret, and Sunday is Simchas Torah. Now, what we're going to discuss a little bit relates to Shemini Atzeret. As a child, we lived for a few years in Israel, and if you would turn to any child in the land of Israel and ask them about Shemini Atzeret, they would not have the ability to identify a specific day as Shemini Atzeret because they call the day Simchat Torah. For us outside of Israel, we have Shemini Atzeret, the 8th day of Sukkot, and the day after that is Simchat Torah. And the big debate and the big discussion we have every single year is what happens Shemini Atzeret regarding the Sukkah. Is there a mitzvah to eat in the Sukkah? Is there no mitzvah? Some people say they only eat at night, some only eat during the day, some don't eat at all, some make kiddush in the Sukkah. Why is there such a debate and a discussion? How does the discussion originate? So it works as follows. The Torah tells us that there's a holiday called Sukkot for 7 days. The 8th day, regarding sitting in a Sukkah, is no longer relevant. It's an independent holiday that we call the 8th day, Shmini Atzeret. So according to Torah law, the 8th day of Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret, is no longer Sukkot, and there is absolutely no mitzvah to eat in a Sukkah. And even more than that, a person should not be eating in the Sukkah because it's not the mitzvah of the day. However, outside of Israel, we have the problem. We have many problems. But the problem we face is that we treat the second day of Yom Tov as if it was yesterday. We're familiar with the Sfeika de Yoma. Our ancestors in Babylonia, 1800 years ago, 1900 years ago, 2000 years ago, weren't exactly sure when Rosh Chodesh was. So therefore, on, for example, the 16th of Tishrei, they would have to treat it as if it is the 15th of Tishrei as well, just in case they had the date wrong. Now, we no longer have any doubts. We have clarity. We have calendars. But nevertheless, we stick to the minhag and we have the Yom Tov Sheni. As a result, when it comes to the day after a holiday, we treat it as if it is the holiday. Now, that works well, for example, on Pesach. Well, in Israel, it's 7 days. Here, it's 8 days. In Israel, they have one Seder. Here, we have 2. But the challenge comes to us on the 8th day of Sukkot, because we want to treat it like the 7th day of Sukkot, Sfeika de Yom, might be day 7. But on the other hand, we know in truth that day 8 is Shmini Atzeret, and we shouldn't be eating in the Sukkah. So what do? So this is something the Talmud struggles with. What do you do on Shmini Atzeret outside of Israel? So you know what the Talmud tells us? Sit in the Sukkah, Yutve Yatvina, and you sit, but don't make the bracha of Leishev Basukkah. This is what the Talmud tells us. So this seems to be the solution of the rabbis from some 1700 years ago. Sit in your Sukkah for meals on Shmini Atzeret. Just do not make the bracha Leishev Basukkah. Now, there are 2 ways to approach this statement, because after all, there is a concern. We shouldn't be blowing the shofar on Sukkot because it's not the mitzvah of the day. And we're not supposed to add to mitzvot. So really on Shmini Atzeret, we shouldn't be sitting in the Sukkah. So the question is, when the Talmud gives this suggestion, sit, but don't make a blessing. What is the Talmud telling us? So there are 2 approaches. Approach number 1 is the following. You should know, people in Babylonia, for example, when it comes to the fall season, would enjoy sitting in a gazebo outdoors. The Sukkah is a comfortable place. So therefore, on Shmini Atzeret, to sit in the Sukkah is not an indication that I'm trying to add to Sukkos. There's no problem there. And therefore, you could sit in the Sukkah. It's acceptable. But the main thing is, don't make a blessing. Don't make a blessing, Leishev Basukkah, because after all, it's not Sukkot, it's Shmini Atzeret. Approach number 2 is, listen, You sit in the sukkah, but do something that indicates that you are not doing it for the sake of a mitzvah. And how is that achieved? By not making the blessing. Now, there's a difference between these two approaches. Because let's say, for example, I want to go to my sukkah on Shemini Atzeret and eat a cookie, just one cookie. Now, usually during Sukkot, if I'm eating only one cookie and I go into the sukkah, eat the cookie, and leave, I'm not going to make a leshev b'sukkah, right? It's not a meal. I'm not making it into a meal. Perhaps if it's a piece of cake with coffee and I'm planning to sit there, perhaps. If I'm washing, yes, I'm going for sure during Sukkot to make the leshev b'sukkah, but just for a cookie, not. So the question is, on Shemini Atzeret, I want to eat a cookie, and only a cookie. So if I take the approach, why not go into the sukkah? It's comfortable. I enjoy doing it. It's not an indication that I'm doing it for the sake of a mitzvah. So then it would be fine to do so on Shemini Atzeret. On the other hand, if what I'm supposed to do on Shemini Atzeret is make it different than Sukkot, since during Sukkot I would not make the blessing, and now on Shemini Atzeret I'm not making the blessing on the cookie, so if so, I should not be eating my cookie in the sukkah, because I should only be eating in the sukkah on Shemini Atzeret those things that during Sukkot I would make a blessing. Okay, so there isn't a difference between the two approaches. Another difference is what happens if Jews move to colder countries. Think of a place called Canada, right? Or Northern Europe. And when it comes to October, it can get cold in October in Northern Germany, right? In Lithuania, in Latvia, it could get quite cold. So the question is, am I going to eat Shemini Atzeret in the sukkah? Well, if all I need to do is not make a bracha v'leshev b'sukkah, and that's enough of an indication, perhaps yes. But if on the other hand, the reasons our ancestors in Babylonia 1800 years ago told us we could sit in the sukkah is because a person might do it for his comfort, well, if it's close to 0 degrees Celsius, no one is going into a sukkah for enjoyment. So perhaps in cold climates, we shouldn't be eating on Shemini Atzeret in the sukkah. So that is why we have a debate and a discussion on different schools. There are those that just continue with the statement of the Talmud, eat in the sukkah, and therefore they try to eat the meals in the sukkah. Any meal that they would during Sukkot make a leshev b'sukkah, for example, if they're eating bread, on Shemini Atzeret they would do it, they would eat in the sukkah without the leshev b'sukkah. On the other hand, there are others that say, wait a second, if I go in cold Toronto, right, into my sukkah, that's an indication I'm doing it for the sake of a mitzvah. I shouldn't be doing it because technically it's not Sukkot. So therefore there are different schools. There are those that would eat during the day because during the day perhaps it's more pleasant. There were those that would go and make kiddush in the sukkah, and then once they're in the sukkah and they say, wait a second, this is not so comfortable here. So they go back inside. So that really explains why we have different traditions, and everyone should follow their tradition. What is clear is that if there are some clear indications during Shemini Atzeret that the sukkah is unpleasant, a bee or two show up. Right? During Sukkot, we try to the best of our ability to continue eating in the sukkah. And Shemini Atzeret, you could be more lenient because staying in that room with a few bees is a clear indication you're trying to perform the mitzvah. So that is how we address the unique questions of Shemini Atzeret. The main thing is to remember, it is a zman simchatenu, a time of happiness. We have to be happy. There's a fascinating statement that Maimonides tells us. The Rambam notes that Shemini Atzeret were happy because during Sukkot there was a level of discomfort to leave our homes and go into the sukkah, but then we come back home Shemini Atzeret and we really appreciate what we have. And this isn't a message that's important now. God willing, we're going to get over this challenge, this pandemic, but what we must do is really appreciate what we have, right? Have a deep appreciation for all those things that we can do now, right? Traveling, you have to think twice, or perhaps it's not even possible. Going to a store for some, and for many, actually, it's a challenging decision to make. Do I run into the supermarket or not? When do I go? These are challenging times, but what we're going to do is we're going to be mindful of them now, recognize them. But boy, when the good days come, and they will be coming, we're going to appreciate everything we have and turn to the Almighty and say thank you. Thank you for all these blessings. May we always appreciate our blessings, but for now it should be a Gut Moed, a Chag Sameach, and only good things for everyone. Bye-bye.